Hi there, Steve Arterburn here, and welcome to Going Deeper. So glad you've joined me here, and I'm loving this series on the magnificent marriage. Some of you might think, man, it's anything but magnificent. But I think if we can put together some of these things, these 8 things that literally create a magnificent marriage, you might find it's a little more magnificent than you ever dreamed it could be. That's my desire here. Okay, so we've done number 1, and so here we are ready to look at number 2. Number 2 is this thing, this strange thing, shouldn't be strange, but it is, of feeling loved. I cannot tell you, but I'm trying to right now, how many people have been married for so many years and they don't feel loved. Isn't that sad? Isn't that tragic that you don't feel loved? Now, I'm going to say something here, and I'd like you to not turn this off. I'd like you to not assume that I'm all wrong or whatever it is. But we're going to start with this. If I'm not feeling loved, there may be a chance that I've got a problem with loving myself. Okay, so I just want to throw that out there. And we're going to get a little and more into that. But look, some people are married for 30 years to somebody that's not very loving. And I don't want to ignore that. And if you're in a relationship where the other person is just not loving, maybe even abusive, then none of this is going to help. In fact, what you would need to do is you'd need to get over into Boundaries in Marriage, get that book by John Townsend and Henry Cloud, and you need to work on intervening in a way that you have at least a nurturing type of relationship, not a destructive relationship, negative relationship. But I'm going to assume that if you're watching this, there's some hope for this being a magnificent marriage, and we're going to move into what can you do if you're not in an abusive relationship? How do we get to that loving feeling? Because we've lost that loving feeling, as the song says. All right, so, but the truth is, there are some people that have a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of negative messages have been thrown at you. You came into the marriage, and I'm going to talk about in the next one, baggage, but you brought some of this baggage in of I don't feel loved. And so you're not going to feel loved, no matter what the other person does, because you can't absorb it. Now, maybe you don't feel loved by God, and so you don't love yourself. You got to work on that love relationship with God. Maybe you don't have a love relationship with God because you got lazy, or maybe it's because something happened and you think God should have prevented it from happening. And when God didn't prevent it from happening, now you're angry, you don't feel God's love. But feeling loved, I have to take care of me first so that I can actually proceed in the loving process, and I'm actually able to feel and receive it because I feel worthy of love. You may have a spouse who's kind of given up on you because everything they do and try to do in helping you feel loved, it just doesn't work. So you have to build on your own sense of love for yourself. You know, the Bible said we need to love our neighbor as ourself. So there's the standard. It's self. You got to love yourself. And I know there are a lot of parts of me that I don't love. But I love myself. I love what God's given me, the gifts and things that God's given me. I love using them. And so I've really got to work on my love for me if I can't feel it from anybody else. So what do I need to do? Well, maybe I have low self-esteem because I've heard so many negative messages about me. I know parents that raise kids thinking it's a good idea to say you'll never amount to anything because now the kids are going to try to amount to something to prove the parents wrong. To me, that is just nuts. But that's the way some people operate. So you have to learn to love yourself, and one way to do that is to build up self-esteem, and when you feel good about yourself, that you're growing, you've taken care of the shame. If somebody has something against you, you've tried to resolve that. So you love yourself, you feel pretty good about yourself. And this isn't going to be the same for everybody, but you at least go to work on you. Self-confidence, self-esteem, and the ability to feel loved by loving myself first. Now, let's just say we need to stop right here. You think about it, and you've tried to practice self-love, but man, it's just not there. You realize it. In fact, you might even say, I hate myself. That's when you got to get some help. You call 1-800-NEW-LIFE, you get a counselor to meet with you, and the topic of the counseling is, I don't feel loved, and I've discovered in the process that I actually don't love myself, kind of despise myself, and am upset about that. And so you get some help. You get a little bit of that medicine in you to repair that part. Okay, so let's say we fix that. Now, how do I feel love? Well, the love coming from another person isn't necessarily going to feel the same as love coming from mom and dad. Everybody loves in a different way, and everybody has limits on that love. Now, I want to give you a bizarre example of this. I knew a girl whose father was one of the, I just think he was mean. And he really didn't have a lot of humanity in him. No compassion, no empathy. And this girl at the age of 7 was so afraid of her father that she would just wet her pants and down it would run her legs, humiliating herself in front of the father who was so mean and powerful and destructive. Well, when she graduated from from high school, he got her a little Mercedes. He had a way of getting cars that were relatively cheap, that looked relatively good. And he never gave her the nurture she wanted, never gave her the just that unconditional love. He didn't have it in him, but he gave her a car. Now, when I started talking to her about this, other people would have said to her, oh, that's so sad. He tried to buy your love, or all he could give you was a material thing. You know what I said? I said, you know what? The way you've described your father to me, he couldn't be loving to you. And if I were you, I would take that car as a symbol of what he'd like to be able to do. It really is all he's able to do, is buy you something. And if that's all he's able to do, then let's acknowledge it for what it is. Yes, it's sad. Yes, it's too bad. But don't miss it that it's an act of love. Not a great act of love, material thing, but it's his way of showing his love. So I'm not saying it's good or proper or whatever, but I'm saying don't miss it that that's his way to show love. So somebody else may come into the marriage and maybe that was their experience. And they don't really, love's never been shown to them. They don't know how to show that love. You're going to have to maybe adapt and adjust and try to understand the childhood of this other person so you can understand what they're doing and the meaning of it, and that it really is loving. Now, if the person that you love is not kind, then of course you're not going to feel loving. And you can be not kind and not abusive at the same time. So I'm not talking about yelling and screaming, calling you names, shaming you, but a person can just be off on a tangent of not being kind. And that's where you've got to have a conversation with that other person that you're married to say, look, I am not feeling kindness coming from you. And to me, that's kind of a basic level standard level in the relationship. So you've got to have some kindness there. You need to talk about it. And then you got to ask yourself a question. Am I doing things that's bringing love to me? Am I the person that has the problem? Am I the one that doesn't know how to love? I'm not kind. I have to look at that. And I may have to get some help for that. Or I may have to abandon a strategy that you've discovered simply doesn't work. Okay, so one of the ways to feel loved is to be open about your feelings. Open about your feelings to somebody who can validate those feelings and communicate that they kind of understand what you're going through, kind of understand how life is for you. Another way to feel love is to be open to love. Maybe being loving makes you feel vulnerable, and you don't like feeling vulnerable. So you have to open yourself up to being loved. Now, some people, I talked about this is the magnificent marriage, but the problem began when you were dating, and there were some things that weren't in place in your life, like relationships with other people, nurturing relationships with other people. And you weren't nurturing of other people. So you brought that in. So we've got to, here again, I got to correct that. I got to love myself, but I've also got to nurture compassion for the other person, nurture some kind of vulnerability that the person can feel safe in being vulnerable. Because if they can feel safe in being vulnerable, then one of the most vulnerable things is to share the feeling of love. Because now I'm saying, here I am for you. Are you here for me? Now, how do you feel some love when you don't feel loving? Well, you need to be in contact with people who lift you up. Not talking about somebody of the opposite sex, but the same sex. Outside of your marriage, you need those people, those friends that can build you up, send you back in there. You need to change your inner dialogue where you're nicer to yourself and you're kinder to yourself with the things that you say to yourself. You may need to work with a therapist to get to that place where you're kind to yourself. And you need to read some books about love, loving yourself, loving other people. The other thing is we've got to eliminate this thing that might be there, and that is this obsessive self-obsession that can be destructive, to where you're not throwing anything out, you're expecting everything to come back in, and it's just not going to happen. Until you're able to give love, you're not going to be able to receive it. So what can you do? You can go to the Marriage Intensive, Intimacy Intensive, because there we're trying to build couples into intimate relationships. That'd be one thing. A counselor, 1-800-NEW-LIFE, we'll find the counselor. A self-help program where you're really building your character and you're growing. But don't give up on love, even though you've had a hard time feeling it. Don't give up on that, because I believe there is a really good chance you can feel it. But the work has to start with you, not the other person. If the other person has a big problem, as I said, you have to do what needs to be done to motivate them to get help for that problem. I hope that's helpful to you. A magnificent marriage is one where I show my love to you and you receive it, and I receive your love, and it feels very loving to experience it. That's what I want for you. Now, if you need some help, you call us at 1-800-NEW-LIFE, Marriage Intensive. We've got that. We've got counselors everywhere. There's no reason to go through life not feeling love. God is love, and I want you to repair whatever it is so you can tap into that love, feel it, experience it, and give it with somebody else. Next time, we're going to talk about baggage. What do we do with that baggage that we brought into the marriage? And I'll see you then, again, on Going Deeper.